Hello, this is Kent Morlan and my friend. What's my friend's name?
I think his name is Ray Pearcey. I'll go by that today, sir.
I claim that Ray is my cousin. Ray says he is, but about 10,000 times removed.
Well,
Is that right, Ray?
I don't have
Maybe 5,000. Who knows?
It's a good. I don't have a handle on that number, but it's.
Well,
I don't even know if it's
if it was
5,000.
20,000, 10,000 times 20 years is 200,000. So we probably have a common ancestor about at least 200,000 years ago, or maybe a little, maybe
Really?
65,000 years.
65 sounds better.
Okay, so that'd only be 3,000.
Yeah.
Anyhow, Ray and I actually have appeared on a radio station before talking about social issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I suggested we get together and do a Kent and Ray show on YouTube. And so this is our first iteration. This is
A trial run, so
trial run. That's exactly right. Anyhow, we were sitting here talking about what we were going to talk about, and I said, "Well, let's talk about the legalization of marijuana." And Ray said, "Well, I think we ought to make it a little broader than that." And I said, "Well, what about legalization of drugs?" And he said, "That's a good idea." So I'll start out. We aren't necessarily in opposition to one another here, so we may both agree on this. I think that we ought to legalize drugs, all kinds of drugs.
Well, I tend to agree, and part of it is a element of a libertarian outlook that I think we share. Libertarian as far as what people do with their time and the habits that they engage in, apart from those that have an invidious effect on other people. Moreover, as you've mentioned, Ken, on several occasions, the society has spent billions of dollars pursuing this so-called war on drugs. Huge sums of money that could have been plowed into any number of other endeavors, and we have very little to show for it.
Well, I'm always prone to say if the war on drugs was a war, which is not, we lost a long time ago.
Totally.
And
we've been taken prisoner, all of us, the entire society.
Yeah, we've got 7 times as many people in prison today as we had 50 years ago, and we have accomplished nothing because the latest stat that I heard is that about 100,000 Americans will die in the next 12 months from drug overdoses, primarily associated with fentanyl, which is a high-powered synthetic opioid that is made mostly in Mexico with products manufactured in China and sent to ship to Mexico, which lets them come in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then they come up with all kinds of ways. In fact, I just reported a case out of Brownsville, Texas, where they caught a guy with a saddle tank on a diesel tractor filled with liquid fentanyl. So you can't imagine all the different ways. And he got stopped because of a traffic violation, which is the way a lot of drug traffickers get caught. They have a tail light out, or they're speeding, or this, that, or the next thing.
Stopped at random.
Right. And of course Biden has just said that he's going to pardon all people who've been convicted of marijuana possession charges that have been convicted in the federal court system, which is going to start off a bit of a storm. I will say that I have never consumed any kind of illicit controlled drugs. You may take the fifth if you wish.
No, I can be transparent certainly about it. I'm in the same boat. Part of it, for me particularly with reference to marijuana, is that I had asthma as a child, and so smoking anything was anathema to me almost from early childhood forward. My mom was a heavy smoker,
That didn't do you any good,
It
did
didn't
it?
do me any good, and it was in part the genesis of some of the studies are on the mark of my own asthma problems, God rest her soul. And she would apologize about her, her addiction to the cigarettes. So I'm in the same boat. There may have been an episode or two in my undergraduate days when a girlfriend, sympathetic to some plight I'd gotten myself into, with a course or an exam, gave me something
It jacked you up?
that I remember on one occasion, and it was simultaneously it was fascinating. One episode at TU where I had an econometrics exam. Econometrics, of course, being the mathematical discipline that overlays modern economics. And it was a tough exam, but I loved the stuff and loved the instructor. But there were a couple of chapters that were going to be covered that I hadn't studied as intensively as I had wanted to. So she told me that I needed to relax, get some rest, and in the morning she'd have something extra for me when I took my coffee. And sure enough, Ken, I went in, and it was a terribly illuminating episode. I went into the classroom, took the exam in probably 15 minutes.
Your brain was in hyperdrive?
My brain was in some kind of accelerated, excited state, and I finished that exam with great confidence, stood up and laughed as I walked out.
What kind of grade did you get?
I got an A. That was one part of the episode. The other part, which was frightening, was that I went home, went back to the dorm room. I think this was like on a Monday, and I got up on Wednesday late morning.
Speed?
That was my
You think
last,
it was speed?
Yes, some variation. Only episode, arguably, in my adult existence, such as it is, apart from alcohol, of course. So I'm in similar territory. We've got a lot of Americans, compatriots though, who have been victims.
Well, and let me give you my rationale, and then you can chime in if you want. The stats that I read say that about 400,000 people a year die prematurely in America from the consumption of tobacco products. About 100,000 die one way or another from the consumption of alcohol, maybe in car wrecks or just alcohol intoxication or cirrhosis of the liver, various sequelae of drinking too much alcohol in short order and over a long period of time. And before fentanyl came along, the number of people who were dying from drug overdoses was a fraction even of the alcohol number, and it's still a fraction of the tobacco number. And the primary cause of death, as I understand it, from fentanyl is they get simply too much of the product, because 2 grains, like 2 grains of salt of fentanyl, will kill you. So when these drug dealers are mixing this stuff up, they aren't very careful, and the result is they kill their customers, which is a bad business practice as far as I would be concerned. But that's what's happening to these people.
Wow.
And often they think they're getting meth, and it's got fentanyl in it, and that kills them, or something else. Heroin was invented by the Germans. Did you know that? And the word heroin means in German means hero.
Right.
They thought it was pretty nifty stuff when they first started making it. And of course, opioids have been around a long time. Seems like Sigmund Freud used opioids, I think.
Well, he and a whole cadre of his colleagues. It was a trendy thing for upper crust intellectuals and artistic types to imbibe.
Of course, there have been people over time, Billie Holiday, and the drummer Krupa in the 40s, 30s and 40s, and I think Charlie Parker was a quote heroin addict too. But none of those people tended to die from it because the products that they were getting were fairly low powered compared to fentanyl. And the Portuguese are doing an interesting experiment in this, that they basically have legalized the possession of all drugs, I think. And I don't know whether they've commercialized it. In other words, they've just made it like buying alcohol or tobacco products. Go in a store, tell them what you want, they sell it to you. It's high quality, very tightly regulated in terms of the potency of what you're getting, so the likelihood of if you're killing yourself with it is pretty small.
Well, the other side of the Portuguese experiment, though, is that they have an extremely well-funded anti-addiction and rehab program.
Whenever you get ready to get off of that stuff, they're there to help you, right?
Exactly.
So when you burn out on the stuff, decide that you want a different lifestyle, they'll help you. And of course, if we set up a system, first of all, to me, it would put the cartels out of business in Mexico and about every other place in the world if you normalize the traffic in these products, or just commercialize it. R.J. Reynolds and the tobacco companies and the pharmaceutical companies would simply get in the business of providing those products too. You could tax them to produce the money for the mental health and the rehab services, and basically reduce the death rate, solve a lot of problems in Mexico, Central America, and South America, and other places where these products are illegally produced and shipped to the United States.
Well, here's part of the dilemma, though, and my understanding of this is imperfect, but part of it in this country with fentanyl and some of the related drugs is that they're not the most people who are addicted, down on their luck, are legal recipients of this stuff.
Oh yeah, well, they think a big chunk of the addiction in the United States currently was created by doctors who were prescribing opioid drugs that they thought were not that addictive.
Right.
And in fact, they were. What's the name of that family that owned that company?
Well, the name of the company is Purdue.
Yeah, Purdue.
I don't know if the family has a different name.
Yeah.
That's the.
Well, they tried that case down in Norman a couple of years ago, and the judge down there found in favor of the state and against the pharmaceutical industry. The Supreme Court reversed it because they went off on a nuisance theory that they were creating a nuisance, and the Supreme Court of Oklahoma wouldn't stand for that. So Purdue Farms and the others got out of that financially, paid a lot of lawyers money, but they never did have to pay the state anything. Unlike the tobacco settlement, which is still paying the state to run anti-smoking campaigns, and the rest of that, try to get the smoking down. And, long ago, I had somebody in my family who became a drug addict. Cocaine was her thing that she liked. She also smoked marijuana, I understand. And some friends came to my wife and said, your daughter's going to die if somebody doesn't intervene. So I went to a retired FBI agent friend of mine, and we put this. She was actually living with the dealer, and we put together a plan to get him arrested. It took us 6 weeks to set him up and knock him down, and get him locked up in the Rogers County Jail. And we then reeled her in, had a family intervention, and she informed us that she didn't need our help, and I then told her where the door was, and I reconnected with her about 4 or 5 years later in Boston, where she had gotten clean and sober and was about to get a degree from the University of Massachusetts, and who now lives on the east coast of Florida, has a Labradoodle dog, 3 kids, drives a van, and teaches computer programming to children, right? So, and she said that I was responsible for that. She was going to show me that she wasn't who I thought she was. And whatever works, you know, that happened to work. Most times probably wouldn't.
Well, I was going to say that's a very happy and very rare story.
Yeah, I'd say so. But my reading on it, when I was dealing with her, I read a lot on treatment of addiction, and the success rate's pretty dismal in it, though. It's only like, and success is having somebody stay clean and sober for a year, and it's about 12%. But that's probably also true of alcohol and tobacco consumption too. Any kind of addiction which involves dopamine in the brain is hard to shake. But
well, I think also it goes, I've read that success, the limited success, stems in part from the minimal character of most of the rehabilitation programs that are out there.
You know, this girl that I'm talking about, she left town. She got away from her friends, and apparently that's a big issue. If you walk away from your friends who continue to consume the stuff, the likelihood that you can get cleaned up increases quite a bit.
Well, true. That makes eminent sense. You know, I think part of it, and I think I told you about the piece in the New York Times on the McKinsey Consulting Organization.
I'd never really heard of them until the other day, and apparently they make billions of dollars telling corporations how to be scoundrels and getting away with it.
Well, they were a major player in ramping up the distribution of fentanyl, and optimizing the way that the pharmaceutical community and the American medical community distributed this drug. And there are huge parts of the country, rural communities in particular, where the per capita consumption of fentanyl is a huge multiple of what it is elsewhere.
Well, you know, I run Morlan.com, where I collect and publish civil and criminal litigation-related information from the state and federal courts. And about every 2 weeks, I report on a case where a doctor has been indicted for running a pill mill.
Right.
And literally people will get in line outside the doctor's office for him to open up, and they go in and he writes them a script, and they go off and they buy pharmaceutical grade drugs, which is better than street stuff. And safer. But then they prosecute the doctor for doing it because there's no medical reason for these people to be getting these products. So.
Well, you know, I've read that the sad part is that there's a whole cadre of people in the population who have severe pain problems, and until recently fentanyl was
drug of choice
and an affordable solution for them. But with the crackdown at the state level and also the feds, they're the very people who can't get the drug because they're obviously not criminally inclined, and they're not very aggressive people, in part because they're debilitated from the pain. And so their status is, they're immeasurably worse off.
Yeah, even the terminally ill people they're afraid the doctors won't give them pain medicine.
And the doctors are afraid as well. They don't want sanctions. They don't want to be out of practice because of, it's a big data thing. The state level medical regulators and the feds, they can see whether a doctor's prescription patterns are anomalous. Tag an apparently discrepant doctor and sanction the hell out of them.
Yeah. Because they can gather all this stuff from the from the CVS and Walgreens and these other places are tracking these drugs. But CVS and Walgreens were included in some of those lawsuits because they were happy to sell the drugs to people because it was a profit margin issue for them.
Sure, and part of McKinsey's part of their consulting act was to optimize the distribution of these drugs, and they worked hand in hand with the retailers, with the pharmaceutical companies, and with elements of the medical community to see that got done, and that was billions of dollars of profits.
Nobody's exempt from this. The president's son, Hunter Biden, apparently has had trouble with the consumption of drugs. I think he was injured and hurt in some way, and that's what got him started.
Yeah, he was in some kind of accident or something. Right.
Well,
and that's not uncommon in terms of the genesis.
Okay, so we agree, legalize the drugs, right?
Yes, with the proviso that the society invest, in rehab and related therapeutic operations, which are not inexpensive.
Right. But now we agree, and obviously there are other people agree. There are people who strongly disagree with us. But the likelihood, in my opinion, that the Oklahoma legislature is going to decriminalize the possession and use of narcotics, even marijuana maybe, and certainly not the United States government. The possession of marijuana is still illegal under 18 United States Code 841, and when they legalized medical marijuana in Oklahoma, I talked to the United States, Kevin Leach over at the United States Attorney's Office about it, and all he would say is 18 United States Code 841 is still the law.
Right.
So the state may not prosecute you for having medical marijuana on you, but the feds can. But they don't, because they don't want to waste their time generally with it.
Well, if there's a miracle in Washington and the Democrats enhance their position in the Senate and retain their position in the House.
Still got to have 60 votes in the Senate, man.
Well,
you can't fix anything without 60 votes.
Proviso, though, if the Dems had 2 additional seats in the Senate on top of their existing count, it stands to reason that they're likely to abolish the filibuster. Yeah.
Have we covered this subject to your satisfaction, or do you have anything else you want to contribute?
We have. It's an extremely expensive, distorting issue that's reshaped the society in ways that aren't desirable. I'll put it that way.
It's really a late 20th, early 21st century prohibition is really what it is. And prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and the war on drugs hadn't worked in the 21st century either.
Well, Ken, I know we want to go on to another topic, but let me close this one out by asking you a question. How come we didn't learn from prohibition? Why didn't the society learn from a 10, 12-year massive experiment?
Yeah.
Prohibition
kicked in right at the end of the First World War, and I think it was repealed finally in 1932.
Right.
And it was just, it caused all kinds of criminality. It turned
created
everybody.
the mob.
Oh yeah, it's a real big problem. But you can call it a form of societal insanity where you keep doing the same thing
Over and over again.
and accepting a different outcome. Right. All right, there, folks, you have it. Ray and Kent think that we need to legalize drugs. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.